Well, hey, Alex and Juan, thank you so much for everything that you do with Law IT. I'm so honored to be here and to share some information with everyone about ChatGPT and AI and how it can make a substantial benefit to your practice. So my name is Tom Martin. I am the CEO and founder of LawDroid, and it's a company that we build AI tools that give you superpowers to be more productive as a lawyer. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to spread the word to your audience and hopefully give people a better understanding of how these tools work and what they could do with them. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. Let's get started. Okay, so my presentation is called ChatGPT for Lawyers. And, it might be with a little bit of melodrama, but I think that November 30th of last year was truly one day that the world changed. And what I'm talking about there is when ChatGPT became publicly available and we all got to play around with it. For me, it was the first time that I was able to have an intelligent and fluent conversation with a machine. And although we had experimented with GPT-3 at least a couple of years prior to that, it was just a game changer. I like this quote from this principal engineer at Microsoft. It captures the moment. It is one of those moments where it's fantastic. You're not sure where it's going, but you're going to find out. I think now, 6 months later, we are beginning to see where this is going. We're beginning to understand the shortcomings as things have played out recently in the courts. There's some downsides to this technology, but there's also a lot of benefits. So what are we talking about? Artificial intelligence generally, but then we have this concept called large language models, which are models that represent language in a way that machines can understand so they can better respond to us. And a type of large language model is a generative pre-trained transformer. Pre-trained meaning that it has been trained against essentially the web and the language that we use in articles and all different kinds of web pages that we have published throughout the years. And it's using that as a head start. So we don't have to actively tell it what to do. We could just train it against this existing body of text, and it comes to understand how we speak and the kind of text or output that we're looking for. So conversational AI is that language-focused interaction. Generative AI, what that means is where you ask for something and it generates text in response to it. You can also create images as we've seen with apps like Midjourney. Fine-tuning is where you take one of those language models and then you provide it with specific examples of things that you want it to understand. Like maybe you train it specifically with motions for summary judgment that you've written before, and then you ask it to create a new motion for summary judgment. You could train it for specific tasks. ChatGPT is the app that we've all played around with and learned how this generative AI works. And a chatbot is just generally that type of app where you can talk to it and it gives you a response. Now, the chatbots that we started 7 years ago, when there was initial interest in chatbots, the expectations were where they are right now, but our ability to deliver on that expectation was down here. Now we're pretty close to meeting people's expectations. So chatbots have become a lot more intelligent. Here are a few of the different apps that you could use with AI. There's OpenAI, of course, ChatGPT. This one here with the little boat is Midjourney, where now with, I think it's 5.2 is the latest version, you could create these amazingly realistic images by just asking for it, show me a cute robot in the style of Van Gogh with wearing a top hat, and it'll create something that's spectacularly realistic. This one, I believe it's called Realistic AI, but it's a voice app that can actually clone your voice. So that's a little scary, but it sounds very lifelike and is a great representation of your voice, and it could create other realistic voices. Synthesia is one that you could create videos on using AI, and Notion, you could keep records in it, and it also allows you to search and create additional information with AI. And then lastly, I'll just mention Jarvis, which is a great writing tool to help you using generative AI. So there's no end to all of the applications for generative AI right now. And I think the hardest part is getting into all of them and testing them to see what you like. So with all of that, let's step back a second. What is ChatGPT? It's not an oracle, okay? It's not meant to be a research tool. It doesn't predict everything. And even with facts, it gets facts wrong sometimes, as we now know. What it is more of a language calculator. What do I mean by that? Well, our number calculators, you type in the numbers you want to add together and it tells you what the answer is, right? Well, with a language calculator, you tell it what you're asking for and it calculates what you're expecting in response. And so it calculates the next probable word based upon what you're speaking to it. So in that way, it's like a language calculator. It's much more than that, though, because it's not only predicting the next word, but it's also been trained on what kind of format of answer you're looking for. So it understands the format that there's a question and then you expect an answer, question, then an answer. We take that for granted, but a machine needs to learn that. So that format of question and answer, or request and then providing an article or some kind of output, that's something that needs to be trained on. In addition to that, we have reinforcement learning. And what OpenAI has done is they've provided these outputs, and then they have a person look at it and then check the boxes to whether or not that's a good output or a bad output. And so the system has been trained by millions and millions of responses and feedback to tell it whether or not the output is good or bad. And so that's really important, because that really is why there was a quantum leap in how good the responses have become. This is ChatGPT, as we all have probably seen. Probably the most important here is that it may occasionally generate incorrect information, as we know from the Avianca Airlines case with Attorney Schwartz. Didn't read that as closely as he should have, but it is a good lesson for all lawyers out there. As with any work product, you don't just take output or a memo that you get from an associate or from a law clerk or from a paralegal or even from an administrative assistant and then just hand it over to the judge. You have a duty to review it, to understand it. We have a duty of competency as lawyers to make sure that it is correct. And then only after we've reviewed it and signed off on it as a licensed lawyer do we then, file it with a court of law. And just in the same way, if you do use ChatGPT for any kind of research, I would suggest you don't, but if you do, you need to double check the answers. What's much more interesting and much more important and reliable is when you use tools that are built on top of the ChatGPT technology. So not ChatGPT itself, which may have some privacy concerns as well, but when you use a tool that is built on top of ChatGPT technology. And we'll talk a little bit about examples of that later. So how does it work? Well, when you put that prompt in, when you type in what you want, like what is the meaning of life, it gets sent over to OpenAI in this request. So without getting into too much of it, you can see that the prompt is right there. Prompt, what is the meaning of life? It counts how many tokens. Now, OpenAI, it has limits in terms of how much information it can process and it counts the limit in terms of tokens, not words, not letters, but tokens is what the machine understands. You also tell it what model you want to use. So here we're using DaVinci, which is ChatGPT 3, or excuse me, GPT 3. If it was ChatGPT, that would be ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo. If it was GPT-4, it would say that. So you could tell it and select from the different models. Temperature is interesting. It's really when you tell it how creative it could be with the output it provides to you. And so that's the circle here, is you send over the prompt, like a short order cook gets the order and says, okay, you want to know what the meaning of life is, you're using this model, and you don't want me to be creative, setting the temperature to 0. All right, this is what you get back, and then it gives you the response. The meaning of life is a deeply philosophical and existential question, yada, yada. So this is a basic understanding of like what is going on behind the scenes when you send a request over to OpenAI. So the tokens, without getting into too much detail, this is how it breaks it down. It looks at the different words in a prompt, and then it breaks it down and converts it into a number of tokens as opposed to a number of characters. And it also thinks in terms of the length of what you're sending over as 1,000 tokens. 1,000 tokens roughly equals 1.5 pages. So here, with these different models, there's 4,000 tokens here, is the context limit for GPT 3.5. And you get charged for every 1.5 pages about, what, 2 hundredths of a cent per page and a half for GPT 3.5. The point being is that there's different models of OpenAI. 4 is the most powerful, 3.5 is ChatGPT, and GPT-3 is DaVinci. And each of these have different prices. And so the pricing gets more expensive as you use the higher models, and there's limitations with each of these. One thing that you may have come across when you use ChatGPT is that if you try to paste in like a multi-page document, that there's an error or it won't process it. And that's because there's a maximum amount of tokens you could send over at once. And so you have to limit what you send over within that limit. So for 4,096 tokens, that might be six to 7 pages of information you could send over. That comes up when you're asking it like, hey, can you write me a demand letter and then use this example for an auto accident? And so you could only put in enough information that will fit and be accepted by OpenAI. So you need to think of those limits when you send over information. The temperature is how random or creative you want the response to be. If it's set to 0, then it's only going to give the most probable answer. But if you set the temperature higher, it could go as high as 2. But if you set it to, let's say, 0.2 or 0.5, it will give you other probable answers. So for most legal applications, we want to set it to 0, so it just gives us the most probable answer. You may have also heard of a concept called embedding. And so embedding is how the OpenAI model comes to understand words. And the way it understands words is that you feed the phrase, like a cow goes, into this embedding model. It converts it into numbers, and the numbers is what the machine understands. And so it represents this phrase as a bunch of numbers. And so these different numbers create a vector. So one way to think of a vector is just like a point in 3D space, kind of like when we look at the night sky and we see different stars in the sky, kind of like this, where there's different points in the sky, and each of these points creates a point of meaning in this, let's call it a semantic universe. And so, the star for a cow goes will be right next to the star for moo, so that when you ask, what does a cow go? Moo would be right in the same constellation of meaning. It's just one way to visualize how is this computer able to figure out that when you say a cow goes, the output should be moo. It's because it's taking all of these words and grouping them together in similar concepts. And so that's how it could find similar meaning when you ask to search for it. So GPT-3 was 175 billion parameters that was trained on. So when we talk about that pre-trained transformer, we're talking about everything that it was trained on to be able to answer our questions, right? And being able to have a conversation with us. And so it was trained on 175 billion parameters. One way to think of parameters is as facts about the world. So that's a lot of facts. GPT-4, by comparison, was trained on 100 trillion parameters. So it has a lot more information, orders of magnitude greater, as you can see here, from GPT-3. So because it's trained on a lot more information, it has a lot more to draw from in answering your questions. And you've probably seen that GPT-4, when you use it, it's much better at reasoning, actually taking a problem and walking it through step by step and breaking it down and understanding it. So with all that technical gee whiz stuff, like what can you actually do with it? What could you practically do with it? Well, you could use it to brainstorm ideas. This is actually a really good application of ChatGPT and GPT-4. So for example, I run a personal injury law practice. I want to write some blog articles about the typical issues that come up for somebody involved in a car accident. And I just like being a lawyer. I don't like writing all these articles, come up with 4 different ideas for me to write about personal injury issues that come up for people that are involved in accidents. And very quickly you could write, several ideas. You could even write the first 3 paragraphs or so for you of different blog articles that you could publish. And of course, you want to review the content before you publish it. It's also good at summarization. So if you pasted in a few pages, remember that there's only so much you could paste in. But let's say you pasted in a 5-page contract and you asked it to summarize the most relevant points in that contract. It could make that into something really easy to understand, so that if in short order a client wants to understand it, you can simply provide them with that summary. Likewise, if you're not too sure if you spelled everything correctly or put apostrophes in the right place and conjugated everything perfectly, you could send it over for a grammar check, and GPT-3 could check it for that. As a writing assistant, it just helps you to get started. I think one of the most human problems that we have with writing is just getting started. So if you have a tool that can help you to get started and not procrastinate by coming up with ideas, that's a great application of generative AI. And it also could translate really well. Right now in our own tool called Copilot, we have 6 different languages that it can translate into, and it does it extremely quickly, and the quality is really good. So let's look at some specific examples that you might use in your own practice. Here, write an auto accident demand letter from our law firm to the insurance company asking for $150,000 in damages, $25,000 in medical bills, $5,000 in car repairs, $75,000 in chiropractic. So if any of you do personal injury, this is something you do day in, day out. Within a few seconds, ChatGPT comes up with a letter that, there's a few fill in the blanks, but it's a great place to start. If you were procrastinating and wanted to put off writing the letter, it gets you started very quickly within a few seconds. And the one thing when I talk to lawyers that comes up is when they see that this is possible, then they think of, well, wouldn't it be wonderful if I could give it my medical records that I have for the client, or the chiropractic records, or the nurse practitioner's life care plan. If I could feed all of that information into it, then it could write a much better demand letter. And that's all true. You can't do that with ChatGPT, but with legal tools, legal AI tools like Copilot or others out there in the market, you can do stuff like that. It makes it much more powerful. So a great source of additional prompts that you might want to look into is awesome ChatGPT prompts. You could find this on GitHub. So if you go to github.com, GITHUB.com, you could find a whole bunch of prompts that they're not even legal specific. It could be you want ChatGPT to pretend to be your life coach and give you some guidance on your career, or it could be a fitness coach. Mitch Jackson, a friend of mine, he has a few examples in here about how you could use ChatGPT to write in different writing styles. So, write this demand letter, but in the style of Edgar Allan Poe, or in the style of any author that's your favorite. This here, Legal Prompt Engineering, is actually another repository available at the MIT Law Lab. And a friend of mine, Dazza Greenwood, has put this together. And these are specific legal prompts that you could use, like the demand letter prompt or others. So check that out. And this video might be fun to watch. I put this together with some really great thought leaders. Dazza Greenwood, you can see here, that I mentioned before. Jackie Schaefer, who has a company called ClearBrief, and they use AI in analyzing contracts and other documents. And Natalie Ann Knowlton, who is an expert in access to justice efforts. And you can see here that, yeah, we had ChatGPT itself as an additional panelist. And that was a lot of fun having them all together. I moderated it, and you should really watch it. ChatGPT and implications for the legal industry. There's a lot to learn from there, and there's an extended question and answer session afterwards. One thing I have to say is ChatGPT is a bit long-winded, goes on and on and on, and Jackie actually called it a mansplainer. So anyways, check that out. So I want to stop for a second to talk a little bit about this. This is an article that I wrote that was published on Artificial Lawyer. And really the point of this article was that I think a lot of lawyers, they make the mistake of expecting ChatGPT to be what I call push button perfect. That means that if they tell it, okay, I would like you to write a winning Supreme Court brief about equal justice applied to university admissions, and do your best. So if it was so general like that, ChatGPT or GPT-4 even wouldn't have enough information to really put it together. But lawyers' expectations are so high that they think they can give it very general instructions and expect something perfect. And even if it had all of the information that it would need, it likely would not be able to pump out a winning Supreme Court brief. And so lawyers' expectations are so high, and they provide such a general request, that it leads to this mentality that, well, if it's not push button perfect, where it doesn't produce that winning brief, then I want nothing to do with this. This is a broken tool, and come back to me when it's ready for prime time. I think that's a real mistake. That strategy is wrong. And some lawyers might be responding to the case just recently in New York, saying, hey, there's some wrong cases here. I completely understand that, but that's not a reason to disengage and not use the technology or not try to better understand the technology. If anything, it's the opposite. I would say you want to look at the technology as a creative collaborator. You want to look at it as a way of getting you started, helping you to move forward in creating your work product. It could also help you to brainstorm and think through the process and your argument. And if you look at it that way, as a creative collaborator, not a push button perfect solution, but a collaborative tool, that's the right mindset to have. And it's one that'll keep you working with it so that as the technology improves, so will your use of it. And these are some of the benefits: less procrastination, less effort to get work done. It gives you more insights because you could ask it to look at your argument from different points of view, and it can argue with you from different points of view. You can get more work done through all of these efforts. And hopefully it leads to a better work-life balance because you'll spend less time procrastinating and less time on things that can be automated. So where can you get it? ChatGPT Plus, of course, you could pay for a subscription through chat.openai.com. The upside to using the $20 a month version is that you could actually turn off training so that it won't train against the information you're giving it. So that gives you additional privacy. The default for the free version of ChatGPT is they use everything that you send to them for training purposes. So if you're putting in anything sensitive, they might use that for training purposes, and who knows where that could come up. But if you turn off that setting so that they cannot use it for training, and that's only available through ChatGPT Plus, you could be a little more secure in knowing that they won't use it for training purposes. And yeah, this is just a little more information here about ChatGPT Plus. But you also get that benefit of having additional privacy if you use third-party vendors that, like I said before, are tools that are built on top of this technology. And so some applications that are powered by ChatGPT, again, they're not ChatGPT, but they're built on that technology, are applications like this. There's mine, LawDroid. We have Copilot, and it's an AI legal assistant that helps you to be more productive, does basic legal research, summarization, grammar check, translation, a whole slew of things that you would normally use a whole bunch of different products for. CaseText has CoCounsel, which is also an AI legal assistant that does a lot of the same functions. It also creates legal memos, and it could search through and summarize large amounts of documents. ClearBrief, as I mentioned before, is an AI that works with contracts and reviewing documents and summarization. Harvey does a lot of the above. It is being used by Allen and Overy and PricewaterhouseCoopers, but many of us have not actually gotten to use it. It's more of a very invite-only type of application. Jurisage is a great research tool that I believe up till now is primarily Canadian law-based, but it does great summaries of Canadian law and allows you to ask questions about those cases using generative AI. Spellbook is a very popular Microsoft Word plugin that allows you to use AI when you're drafting contracts. So you could be drafting a contract, you reach, let's say, the section that's going to be about governing law, and you just don't want to draft it, or you want AI to do it for you. You just type in governing law, you click spell, and it actually autofills like a standard governing law provision for you. So it could really help you to draft faster. LawDroid Copilot is our product. So we create AI tools that give you superpowers because they let you do 10 times what you can normally do, be stronger, faster at getting your job done. We have an early access plan currently. So we're in a research beta. We have over 500 users right now and over 1,000 people on our wait list. And as you can see here, Copilot has been noted to get more work done so that maybe you don't have to, hire as much. Maybe you don't have to spend as much of your budget to get the same outcome. And so this is an example that I'll share with you. First off, you could see here that Copilot, we've simplified ChatGPT and made it safe. You don't have to worry about hallucinations. You don't have to worry about learning prompt engineering. We've simplified prompts to buttons. So we have a button for summarizing, a button for grammar, a button for drafting an email, or even brainstorming. So we made it simple. This is an example of our case law research. So here, for example, you just type in, show me cases involving child custody where the parent has stopped paying child support in California. So you do need to tell it the jurisdiction and the kind of case you're looking for. And very quickly, we produce a list of relevant cases. And you could look at previews right there to get a thumbnail sketch of what the case is about, and then decide if you want to drill down and learn more about that case. You could read the case, so nothing mind-blowing there. You could read the case if you want to. But the part that's really interesting that AI makes possible is you could brief a case. So back like we did in law school, our system, what's happening here is that it's actually reading through the case. It's figuring out, okay, what are the facts of this case? What is the issue that's presented by the court? What is the procedural history? And it's doing all of that on the fly, dynamically. None of this is pre-programmed. It is reading through it, analyzing it, and then providing us with answers to each of those questions. What is the rule? What is the holding? What is the reasoning involved? And it all checks out. You could also ask follow-up questions, for example, like what is the name of the judge who decided this case? And it will read through that case and answer the question. So it's really pretty amazing. It's like speaking to a colleague and getting up to speed on the law in a very natural, human way. So right now we have a special offer for those watching. It's only $5 a month to sign up for our research beta plan. And you could find out more about that by going to lawdroid.com and signing up for early access. We could also put you to the front of the line and just mention that you learned about us on Law IT's webinar. With that, I want to thank you so much for sharing this time with me and letting me educate you a little bit about generative AI and how it can help you do more and be more productive with your law practice, and ultimately be more profitable and have more time to spend with your loved ones. So again, thank you to Alex and Juan and Law IT. I really appreciate this opportunity. And if anybody would like to follow up with me, you could follow me on Twitter at LawDroid, or you could email me at tom@lawdroid.com. Thank you.